Welcome, everyone. It is Sunday, January 30th. We welcome, and I'll introduce them in 1 minute, two people from the American Friends of the Parents Circle, and they share the human side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with the American public in order to foster a peace and reconciliation process. They are committed. So this is the American Friends of Parents Circle Families Forum. Our two presenters today, Gili Meisler lost his only brother, Giora, in the Yom Kippur War. After being missing in action for almost 2 years, Giora became known as the missing soldier of the Yom Kippur War. Gili is a filmmaker who made Fireflies, in which he tells the story of Giora's disappearance and what happened to him years later in the Far East. 6 years ago, Gili joined the Bereaved Families Forum. He also conducts dialogue meetings in which he seeks to harness his personal story to promote dialogue and reconciliation. Laila Alsheikh lives in Bethlehem in the West Bank. In 2002, her 6-month-old son, Kwasi, became ill, and Israeli soldiers prevented Laila from taking him to the hospital for more than 5 hours. He soon died from the lack of time, but rather devoted her time and energy to ensure a better and more peaceful future for her children. And Makom Salel Lakeside welcomes you, and we can't wait to hear your stories.
Hi, I'm sure that me and Laila are really happy to be here with you. Thank you for inviting us. Let me tell you a little bit what we'll do today. At the beginning, Laila will share her personal story, and then I will share mine after her. In some point, somebody from the American Friends of will join, and I guess she will at the end tell you some general information about us, and will ask you to donate money. So be prepared. Anyway, you're most welcome to ask us anything. Believe me, Laila and me have done this many times, and we heard it all. Don't be shy. You can ask us everything at the end. So please, I welcome Laila to share her personal story.
Thank you, Gili, so much, and good morning, everyone. As Gili said, we are so happy today to be with you and share with you our personal stories and start to talk about this amazing organization. So my name is Laila Sheikh. I'm a Muslim Palestinian mother. I was born in Jordan because my parents went to Jordan because my father was a teacher, and he went to Jordan to teach the refugees children in Jordan. So after that, in 1967, the war was started, and the Israeli government take a decision to close the borders and didn't let my parents to came back. So they lost their citizenship as Palestinian and they become Jordanian. So me, my brothers and sisters was born there. My childhood was very normal. Maybe the unique thing that I have twin brother. So I finished my study in accounting business in Jordan. Then I met my husband in Jordan because he's originally from Bethlehem. In 1999, I came back to Bethlehem to continue our marriage and start to have our own family. So I was so happy to be here, and for every Palestinian who born outside Palestine, it's like a dream come true. And I was really so happy. Our happiness become much more after 1 year when we have our first daughter. We named her Yara. She's amazing, intelligent, beautiful girl. And after 2 months, the second uprising was started. And I was really at that time so afraid because it was the first time I lived in a war like that and crazy situation. But I was hoped that it will end soon. But unfortunately, every day become much worse and worse. But at that time, I wasn't care too much because I have my daughter to take care of and my husband. And at that time, the Israeli government take another decision to not to give the people like me who came from other countries the Palestinian ID. So most of the time, I should stay at home because if they know that I didn't have it, maybe they will take me to jail or send me back to Jordan. But I wasn't care too much because I have my own family to take care of. And but I was thinking about my family in Jordan because I wasn't know for how long I will never see them. After second year, we have our second child. He was a boy. We named him Qusay. He was a beautiful, intelligent boy. Our happiness became much more because our family became bigger, and I will be busy much more and don't think about the situation around me. But this happiness was ended 11th of April 2002, 4 o'clock in the morning when he was woke up in a very critical condition because one day before the Israeli soldiers came to our village through tear gas and he smelled some of it. At that time, the treatment wasn't good enough in our village. So we tried to take him to a hospital inside Bethlehem. So when we went there, the Israeli soldiers told us that that Bethlehem is closed and it's a military zone and we can't enter it. We tried to explain the situation for them, but they didn't listen. So the second chance was to take him to the next city. It's called Hebron. The main road will take 20 minutes, but again, the Israeli soldiers didn't allow us to go from there and they said it's close to. So the last chance was to take him to Hebron, but through villages and the road will be rough, long, but it was the only chance that we have. And again, between those villages, we faced another Israeli checkpoint. The soldiers in the beginning came, they searched the car, they searched the ID of my husband and my father-in-law. And then my father-in-law started to explain for them in Hebrew, because he's the only one who speaks Hebrew, that our son in very critical condition and he should be in a hospital as soon as possible. But they didn't listen and they asked him to stay in the car. The time was start to pass and every minute was so important to save his life. And I was thinking, this is the most maybe hardest thing, to feel hopeless. And as a mother, the only thing that I was thinking about how to take care of my son or my two children and to prevented them from any harm. And now I feel hopeless. I couldn't do anything. Then I think to have a risk and start to talk to those soldiers. And that risk, if they found that I didn't have my ID, maybe they will send me back to Jordan or send me to jail and I will never see my children again. But at that time, the only thing that I was thinking about and care about is my son and how could I save him? So I went there to talk to them and try to explain to them in English, and then they start to laugh at me and they asked me to stay in the car more than 4 hours. We stay until they said, you can go now. So when we reached the hospital, the doctor said it's too late. And if he will stay alive after 48 hours, he will be a handicap. So the two choices was very hard to think about or even to believe. A few minutes later, they take him to the intensive unit care and didn't let us to enter the room. 2 o'clock in the evening, the doctor came and he said to us, you should leave the hospital because the Israeli soldiers will come and search the hospital, because every day they do that because they think that the fighters came and hide inside the hospital. So we argue a little bit with him, and I told him our son inside the intensive unit care, and you could tell them. And he said, because your son inside, you can't be with him, so please leave. We argue a little bit with him, and he said, please leave. So that was one of the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. How could I left him alone there without being beside him, take care of him, or even speak to him? We reach our house in the evening. Immediately, I go to the phone inside the house of my parents-in-law, because at that time we wasn't have cell phones. So immediately I call the doctor and start to ask about him. And he started to explain and speak about his condition. Then I start to realize and understand that he tried to tell me something. But inside of me, I start to try not to believe him or to understand what he's talking about. So my husband came and he asked me what's going on. I told him, I don't understand what he's talking about. Please talk to him. So he talking to him, and I asked him to let the speaker on. So he repeat the same words to us. And I start to shout in him, what do you mean by this? And he said, I'm really so sorry your son died. And that was the hardest words I've ever heard in my whole life. That moment, I felt that his word was like a bullet comes to my heart, smash it down for many pieces. I started to cry and scream like a crazy, didn't know what to do. Few minutes later, the house was full of people, friends, relatives, neighbors, came to see what happened. And but at that moment, I wasn't care about any one of them. The only thing that I was care about is my son. So I started to convince myself this is lie, or maybe I was slept in the car and this is a dream, and I will wake up and go back again, bring him back to the house, and he will be in a good health. But when the time was gone, I was realized that was the truth. And that was maybe the hardest night I've ever heard in my whole life. In the middle of the night, I was so tired, and I was put my back to the wall and slept maybe for 5 minutes. And then I have a dream that there is a white dove and came, stand on my shoulder and said to me, Mama, don't cry, I'm so happy. But from that moment until now, I couldn't stop crying every time I speak about him or remember that dream or remember anything, because he was part of my soul, part of my heart. And that was so hard for me, because even my family wasn't beside me at that time, and I always felt that I'm alone. And a lot of bad emotion comes to my head, to my heart. Next day, they went to the hospital to bring him back to say goodbye for him. So I was missing him so much, because this is maybe the only time we were separated for that long. Immediately when they came, they put him between my arms. I was taking his blanket off because I was missing him so much. And I was shocked when I saw him. He was very blue. And I tried to kiss him in his cheek, as I always do, but at the time it was totally different, because I felt that I kissed a frozen rock. Without thinking, I hugged him so tight to warm him. And I was thinking maybe some kind of miracle will happen and he will go back to the life. But unfortunately, the only thing that happens is that they take him away from me. And that was the last minute I hugged him. That was so hard for me, hard to feel or hard to think about. From that moment, our life changed. Many things in our life was changed. Like after his death, my husband tried to convince me to have another child, and I was refused for 3 years. And he tried to let my parents-in-law talk to me, and my family in Jordan talk to me, and even our doctor. And one day he called me and he said, "Why you didn't want to have another child?" I told him, "For what I will have him? If he in some way or somehow he will be maybe died, or he will go back to the rest of his life to jail, because for somehow he will be part of this cycle of violence, even if he didn't want to, but this sometimes happen." And I was lost one, and I didn't want to lose another children. After this 3 years, and after they talked to me, I was say yes, and we have another boy, and we give him the same name, Osai, because I want always to remember what happened to our son. Every time I call him, I remember what happened to his brother. I didn't want to forget, because that was so hard for me to really believe or understand. Because every time the Israeli soldiers tried to kill someone or take him to jail, they said he threw stones, or he tried to bomb, or he is a sniper. But my son was just 6 months old. What is the crime that he've done? And I answered myself and said, his only crime that he's a Palestinian. So at that time, I wasn't really think to take revenge, because revenge will never bring anything back. But at the same time, I take a decision not to talk to any Israeli person for more than 16 years, until one day I met one of my friends. I wasn't saw him for a long time, and he started to talk to me about the Birth Circle Family Forum. And I tried to stop him, and I said to him, "Are you crazy? I'm the last person that you should talk to him about this. You know what happened to me and what happened to my son." And he said, "Because I know you and I know what happened to you, I tried to tell you about this." And he said, "I want to ask you a question. Why until now you didn't tell your other children about what happened to their brother? Yeah, they know that he was died, but they didn't know the story." I told him, "Because I didn't want to lose them. I lost one of them, and that was much more than enough. I didn't want them to think about revenge and be part of this cycle of violence. I tried to keep them safe and keep them away from this conflict." And he said to me, "But maybe this will be a chance for you not just to protect your children, maybe other families, other people." In the beginning, I really wasn't convinced about what he said, and I said, "He's crazy. I don't think something like that happened here after all these years of conflict." And maybe he imagined that, until one day he called me and he said, "There's a conference in Bethlehem and you should come." And just to make him stop calling me, I said, "Oh yeah, okay, I will come." That day in the morning, I was really to give him an excuse, because I don't want to go there. And he called me and he said, "I'm waiting you in the car. I know that you don't want to come and you try to find excuse. So please trust," and came and said, "Oh my God, he will never leave me alone." So we go there. In the beginning, there were just Palestinian. We sit with them, speak with them. It was normal, but after 5 minutes, when the Israelis start to enter that room, I was stand up, try to leave, because I start to feel there's something acting in my chest and I didn't want to see them. When we argue, me and my friend, and he said, "Please sit down and listen," I was looked to the people and I was shocked when I saw them for the first time in my whole life. So the Palestinian and the Israelis start to hug each other and kiss each other like family members, not just friends. And I sit down and said to him, "Okay, I will sit and listen. I want to know what's the thing that make them so close to each other like that." So when the Israelis start to talk about their bereavement and how they lost their beloved ones and their stories, I was really touched and moved because it was the first time I looked at them as a human like me. We share the same tears, we share the same pain. Yeah, there's many difficult situations, but we're still human. So I told him, okay, I want to participate with one of the projects and please tell me much more. So I decided to participate one of the projects called Burn Narrative Project. And this project, it's the best chance for both sides to sit face to face and talk about everything that you could imagine. And these 30 people, there's some common things between them, like mothers, doctors, lawyers, students, whatever. We met for 8 times. During this 8 times, we have 2 professors from both sides speak about the history for the 2 nations. And we went to Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem to know and learn about the Holocaust. And for or in the other side, we went to a Palestinian village inside Israel, what was established before 1948, and start to talk about it. And we have many activities during this project. So the first activity was to speak about something happened during the conflict, affect our lives. So it was the first time I speak about what happened to my son and his story. During this 16 years, even between me and my husband, like everyone kept his pain and memories and everything, and we didn't speak about what happened. So when I start to talk, it's like to open the wound again, bring the whole memories back, the pain, the anger, the sadness. And it was so hard for me. I couldn't complete the story in the middle of it. I started to cry. And I was shocked when I saw an Israeli woman came and sat in front of me and she started to apologize. And I said to her, what's the thing that you apologize for? And she said, yeah, I didn't hurt you, but I apologize because the one who hurt you from my own people, and I'm a mother too, I could understand your pain, could understand even the word that you couldn't say. And she hugged me and she started to cry, and I was really touched because that was the first time someone spoke to me like that and could understand me and feel me without even maybe speak or try to explain. At that time, she didn't know that by her simple words, she changed my whole life. Her word was like a light come from dark and deep place, open my heart and my mind again, because sometimes when we feel of hatred, anger, and sadness, that control us sometimes in a bad way. So at that time, I was decided to be a member of the forum, start to give dialogue meetings inside Palestine, Israel, even around the world. I went with Gili Meisler for the first time to Sweden. We stayed there for 10 days, give dialogue meetings, sometimes three times a day, and that was so great for me. And it was really a chance for me not just to talk to people and to let them know about our stories or about our organization. It was a chance for me to know myself, because it was really transformation. Because at that time, I started to think about many things since I start to meet Israelis and start to know much more about their life. One of the things that I start to think about forgiveness. And some people think that if you forgive, that you mean you will forget, but this is not the truth. I forgive, yes, but I can't forget. The pain is still inside of me, but the thing that I take away is the anger and the hatred. This is what I mean by forgiveness. And I didn't forgive them because of them. Even because of me. And I found it's so easy to talk to people about peace, reconciliation, and all that lovely words. But the most important thing to feel it from inside, because we are not expert in this field, but when you start to talk from your heart, if you didn't feel peace from inside, you can't tell anyone about. Um, Maybe there's a lot of things we could talk about later. And now I want to give a chance to Gili to tell you about his story. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
As Laila said, we've been together abroad in Sweden for 10 days. We've done 3, sometimes 4 dialogue meetings a day. And since then, and before that, we've done so many other dialogue meetings. And every time I hear her, so moving. My name is Gili. I was born in Jerusalem in 1961, so I'm 60 years old. Let me tell you a little bit about my family, my parents. They came from the USSR a few years before that, in 1958, with Giora, my brother. He was 4.5 years old. I don't know if you know, but at that time, from the beginning of the 60s, it was prohibited for Jews to go outside of the USSR. So they were just the last ones who managed to go out. My father was a mathematician. After a year or two, when they came, he joined the Hebrew University. Actually, he was a very famous lecturer and a well-known professor here in Israel. My father grew in a very Zionist home and childhood. His parents taught him Hebrew just from the beginning, from age 3. When they came to Israel, he knew Hebrew fluently. My mother wasn't like that. Her parents were not connected to their Judaism, but she followed my father. This was his really dream, to come to Israel. Actually, he meant to do that before the Second World War, but then the war started and he couldn't. After a year or so, they settled in Jerusalem. Very, very simple, modest apartment, 3 rooms, living room and 2 bedrooms. Me and well, after I was born, me and my brother were in the same room. 7 years difference between us. Most of the time we were fighting. It was my parents' dream to find a new apartment with another extra rooms so they would be able to separate us. Don't have to say too much things about my childhood, quite a normal one. And then my brother, when he was in high school, he was in the Eastern studies, like he studied Arabic. He knew Arabic very well. And that time, also today, students like that, the army likes to take them to the intelligent unit, but my brother, it was very important for him to be a fighter. So in 1972, he finished his high school and he joined the tanks. So he was a young soldier, and then a year after that, in October 1973, one day, in the 6th of October, in Yom Kippur, It's a day that I think that everybody who was here will never forget. Well, it started the day before when everybody saw that in the streets there are so many cars, and then on Saturday, 10 minutes before 2 in afternoon, all of a sudden the siren and the Yom Kippur War began when Egypt attacked from the south, Syria from the north. My brother was supposed to come on this Yom Kippur. My mother, we are not religious, actually we are not at all, we are atheist. And my mother prepared a very nice meal. And then on Thursday, 2 days before or a day before, he called us and said that he will not be able to come. He didn't explain why. He himself didn't know why. And that was the last time my parents talked with him. Actually, I missed this phone call because he wanted to talk to me, and he was angry. I was angry of him because on his last leave, when he was at home, we had a fight, so I didn't want to talk with him. And the Yom Kippur began, and the days passed, and then days and a week and 10 days, and we didn't hear anything about my brother. In some point, my parents became worried, and they started to make phone calls. I didn't say that, but my mother worked at the radio. She worked at the Russian station. It was a small department that broadcasted to those Jews who were left in the USSR. She was also a very big star, like she was very well known. And she started to ask in the radio, in the television, maybe somebody can help. And then when they called the parents of my brother's friends, maybe they heard about their sons. After a few more days, when they didn't hear anything, in September 24th, it was the last day of the war. There was a ceasefire. And from that time, my parents went to searched in all hospitals in Israel. Maybe he's there. And at that time, our biggest hope was that maybe he's in prison, POW. In the only thing that we knew that he was fighting at the southern front in Sinai, in Egypt. A few days after that, on the 29th, one of his good friends got a 24 hours pass to go home because it was the 30th day of after his father passed away, just a few days before the war. And I let him go home to be with his mother and to do some memorial service. Then when he came, he asked his mother, does she have any news about the other friends? And then she told him, listen, about Giora, nobody heard. And then he said, wow, that's impossible. I saw him on the 15th of October. We met here and there in some point in Sinai. And then he called us, he called my parents and told them that story, that he saw my brother, and they talked for a few minutes. And that started very big story. I will not go into it. I'll just say that different information. Let me say this: before the Yom Kippur War, there was not an MIA, missing in action, unit in the IDF. It was only after this war, because there were so many. There were, at the beginning, there were 1,500 MIAs, but most of them, it was because of the big mess. But after some time, the list was a little bit shrinked to a few hundreds. But different information and rumors. There were rumors that my brother is in the Russian prison. Then there was a prison. There was a rumor that he's locked in some submarine. Don't ask. Anyway, the story became really famous. I'm talking about first page in the newspaper, main headlines, and what happened to, and then there started to be another mystery. They didn't find the tank of my brother, and actually until today, in all of the history of the IDF, this is the only tank that the army doesn't know what happened to it. Okay, let me just now say this. I was 12 years old. I wasn't interested in any way in politics before the war. Didn't read news. I read only the sport column. But after the war started, and after the ceasefire, and there started to be so many demonstrations here in Israel against the government, and I, as a kid, I didn't miss any demonstration for months, and I became very angry, full with anger towards the Arabs. I hated all the Arabs, wanted to kill all the Arabs. That year we studied at I was in 7th grade. We studied Arabic as a language, as one of the subjects, and I refused to go inside the class. And after a few months, I joined a very, very right-wing movement. If you know Rabbi Kahana, Kach. So I was, I guess, the youngest member. Time passed. The MIA unit investigated, and they didn't have any information, and then they appointed another officer to make a special investigation. Didn't have any real information. At the end of that year, I'm talking about the summer of '74, my father decided that it's too difficult to be at home. Our home was like a train station. So many people came, mainly towards the weekend. Friends of my brother had lots of circles of friends, from the scouts, from this school, from another school, from the neighborhood, colleagues of my father, colleagues of my mother. Although my parents were here in Israel only 15 years, they knew many people. So my father decided to take a sabbatical year, and we moved for 1 year to Canada, to Toronto. This is the only reason why I'm talking to you, because otherwise I wouldn't know English. Don't have too much to say about that year. I continued to be involved as much as I could. I wrote letters to Menachem Begin and to Yitzhak Rabin and to others. Towards towards the end of the year, now we are talking about June 75. I was sitting in the class, and one day, and the secretary came and said, Gili, please go home. Your parents are calling you. We lived very near to the school. It was a Jewish school. And I came home and I saw in the living room my parents sitting with a person who came from the embassy. And he told us that a few weeks before that, there was an agreement. We actually heard about that. There was kind of an agreement of exchanging bodies between Israel and Egypt. The Israelis handed over a few hundreds of bodies, and the Egyptians handed over 39 bodies. And the last body that they could identify, we're talking about 1975, before the DNA days, as they told my parents with 90-something percent sureness, they identified your son, your brother. The day after that, we were already on an airplane to Israel, and they put us in some hotel in Jerusalem because our apartment was rented. And the day after was the funeral. It was huge funeral, huge. Like, we almost don't have any family. We don't. But since as I told you, my parents knew so many people, and since the case was like, there was this, at the newspaper, the body of Yoram Meisler was identified, but the tank mystery is still on, such. Let me say this, that many people who were there didn't actually believe that this was his body. Many years after that, like 12 years ago, I completed my documentary. The name of the film is Fireflies. You can look and find it, it's free. And I'm just mentioning this because when I interviewed so many people, actually I was really surprised to understand that many people, most of the people actually didn't believe that it's his body. Then we, after a few days, we came back to Toronto just for 2-3 weeks, finished our business there and came back to Israel. And I started my 9th grade. I was accepted to a good school in Jerusalem. The only reason I was accepted is because the principal studied from my father's in the university. In some point in my 9th grade, I decided that I have to do something. And I established by myself a new right-wing youth movement. I wrote something, then went to a print workshop, printed a few thousands of flyers, and I used to wake up early in the morning, waiting in every high school in Israel, handed over this flyer, and after a few weeks, we were like 50, 60 teenagers. We had a usual meeting every Monday evening, and we had different activities and demonstrations, and I will not go into it. That year, my parents finally succeeded in I told you that it was their dream to move to another apartment. Now you can say that there was no need to separate me and my brother, but there was a need because it was so difficult for her, for my mother especially, to go inside our room and, you know. So we moved not so far from where we lived, few blocks, a nicer apartment, a little bit newer building. And in that summer, between my 9th and 10th grade, I started to smoke cigarettes a little bit from here and there. And one day I went down, and it was the summer, so it was morning and no schools. And the gardener, which used to come every, like twice a week to take care of the garden, clean the stairs, he saw me and he, like, you know, called me and he offered me a cigarette, and I took a cigarette and we had our smoke. And then the day after was again, and we had our quality time every few days. But after I left him, I said to myself, what's going on here? Like, he's an Arab. His name is Ali, from East Jerusalem, older than me, just a few years. And I said, he's an Arab. I hate all the Arabs. How come I talked to him? And then it made me think. And I said to myself, wait a minute, he's so nice and funny. And we have really good talks about life and such. And I said to myself that I refuse to be this kind of person who hates all the women, all the blacks, all the gays, all the Arabs. I don't know. I'm not that kind of person. And I can say that Ali really he doesn't know how like he changed my life. We kept in connection. He was, years after that, he was in my wedding with his wife. Every time I tell this story, I say to myself that I must connect to him as soon as possible. I don't know his phone number, but I must find him, and I will. Years after that, like, if I'm going now in time to, let's say, 2010, 11, that's the first time I heard about the Parent Circle Families Forum, when my wife started to work there as the managing the office. And then after a few years, Laila told you about this project that we have, the parallel narrative. So there was some group. I'll just mention that it's a project we do since 2010, I think. We've done already 45 or 46 groups. We take 15 Israelis and 15 Palestinians that they have all something in common. Like, we had groups that they were all doctors or journalists or grandmothers. And I was in a group, actually a very special group, that all of us were bereaved. Was very strong, and that was the first. So they asked me to join this group, and that was the first time I also participate in some activity of the Parent Circle. And that's it. And some years after that, in 2016, I joined the the forum also as a staff member. I'm the new media and communication manager because I have, this background and knowledge of social media, video, etc. So I'm in charge of the our website and newsletter and Facebook and Instagram, and it's an opportunity to ask you to please visit our website. We have really good website, 3 languages. Please sign up to our newsletter. If you have Instagram, follow us, the Parent Circle. This is the name of our account. Of course our Facebook, which is different from the American Friends. We have it's the Parent Circle Families Forum. That's it. I think it's enough. I don't know if Anita is here. If not, I can. Yeah.
She's here. She's
Okay.
here. I'm going to put some websites in the in the chat so that people can see your great work. You have a good website, having been to a lot of different websites. And Anita, did you want to say a couple words? And then I do want to leave some time for questions. So we could also, I'm going to put on my gallery view here to see if we have any questions.
I'd rather see if the questions come up first. I gather Laila and Gili have been able to tell you all the things that Parent Circle does, including the summer camp for Israeli and Palestinian teenagers. It's particularly interesting, in my opinion, just because you've got these Israeli teenagers who are about to go into the army, and it really can affect how they interact in their army service with Palestinians. Same thing for the Palestinian kids who probably have never seen an Israeli who wasn't in uniform. So it really does a lot of work for that kind of tearing down those walls. But yeah, let's go for some questions.
Okay. And I'm putting in the chat first the newsletter, and you can click on that, and I'll have another link in a minute. Any questions? Well, of course I have one. So you've talked about the different groups you speak to. Obviously, everyone on this call can imagine what the synagogue groups look like, but what other groups do you speak in front of? I'm just curious.
Laila, I will answer this. First of all, we are doing about 450 dialogue meetings in a year. That's the average. Even in the Corona year,
Wow.
We managed to do that using Zoom. Mainly, most of the meetings are in high schools in Israel. Okay, because we are allowed to go inside the education system. So we have lots of dialogue meetings in school, which like Israeli and Palestinian come to the school, and it's something like what we do now here. Each one of them or of us presents his personal story, his, her, and then there is time for questions. We are doing also meetings to groups like you before the Corona, and hopefully soon groups that come to Israel, universities. We are managing also to do not as many as we want, but also dialogue meetings in the West Bank. We are not able to go inside the education system because they are not allowing it, but there are groups of students, university students, women group, gathering in homes, etc.
All right, Evie, let's take you, and then I have some questions in the chat. Evie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. Is your group mainly for, or do you have several groups mainly for bereavement or other groups? And are you similar to something like Hands of Peace or Seeds of Peace?
No. Like Seeds of Peace is another movement. We are an organization that we have about 620 members, 320 Israelis and Palestinians from both sides, actually quite even. That the only common is that we are all from bereaved families first, and we all seek for reconciliation, for talking, for and against violence. This
Right.
is
Gili, that's exactly what I was going to say. The parent circle goal is not our members like Laila and Gili and so many others don't. Hi, Laila. Don't speak about political solutions, about governments or parties or anything like that. The goal really is to start person by person, heart by heart, to begin to see how we all can talk to each other and see the humanity in each other from that common grief. And that if these folks, if Gili and Laila and all these other folks can find it in their hearts, the courage to turn away from revenge and work towards reconciliation and hope after having lost, after paying such a price, these are the people we need to listen to, that the leaders need to listen to.
Right. So I have two questions. Laila, did you?
Sorry, before that, I want to add something.
Yes.
She answered the half of the question. She asked if all of them are bereaved. No, we have people who participate the Parallel Narrative Project. They are not bereaved family, but they can because they want to know much more and they want to participate. They want to learn much more about this. So we have maybe more than 3,000 people who participate in the projects.
And for Laila, did you seek any compensation from the Israeli government through legal means?
For me, no, because all the money in this world will be like zero beside my son's life.
Yeah.
I don't ask for it.
Yeah. Gili, was yours tank ever found?
no.
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 Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And Susan Wellick, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned, Anita, about a summer camp for teenagers. And I'm wondering if there's ever any dialogue with the teenagers about the two different narratives that each group is coming from. Because Jewish people and Israelis have one narrative of how this all began, and Arabs and Palestinians have another narrative.
Right.
And are they ever taught to understand where each is coming from?
Short answer, yes. I mean, that's the point. The point is to bring these Israeli kids. I mean, Laila and Gili, you could probably speak to this too. And a lot of the kids who are taking part in the summer camp are the children of the next generation of some of our members. The whole point of that week is to bring kids together to find out that they have a lot in common. They listen to the same music. They like the same clothes. They listen to the same bands, but also to listen to each other. So they begin again, heart to heart, begin to understand what the other one is going through. They go through shared trips. They they listen to, they learn about each other's lifestyles and each other's culture, and they learn to listen to each other and to break down some of those walls of stereotypes, prejudice, and absolutely listen to each other's narratives.
Yeah.
We have time for some more questions, but I do want to say that we so thank Gili and Laila for sharing. And we believe and we teach that there's many narratives, and it's so important to hear all the narratives and to teach our kids. And people have been mentioning Hands of Peace. They will be speaking to our students later this year. It's a great program. And, we're going to put out the YouTube link of this. So if people want to hear and listen to your stories, which are so moving, that'll be available. So at this, let me just see if there's any other questions. I think we got to all the questions in the chat. What I also have to say this morning, I'm going to start crying. has given me hope. And I
That's,
think that's why you speak.
yeah, that's exactly right, Vanessa. I mean, I've known Vanessa for, I don't even know how many years. You all coming here and listening to Laila and Gili does give us hope, especially within the American Jewish community, where certain topics, certain ideas, we don't even talk about. If we don't start talking to each other, it will never stop. As Rabbi Damelin says, it's just another ceasefire. That's not where we need to go with this. And the work that Parent Circle does in Israel and Palestine, that's why I book dialogue meetings 2, 3, 4 a month to raise the awareness, to support the work that they're doing. And little by little, heart by heart, that's exactly, I mean, Laila, you've spoken about this. I've heard you say this. There's, you know, the top down hasn't been working, where the leaders are not listening to the people on the ground. The members of the Parent Circle in every project that we do is geared towards building that community from the ground up of people who will listen to each other, who respect each other. They may not agree on politics. They may not agree on who should be elected, etc. But they agree that they are human beings looking at another human being, and that respect is what fuels all the work that we do.
Marilyn said it's been an inspiring morning. Gili and Laila, you should check the chat because there's a lot of great things coming in. It's important to share our stories. Next week, Rabbi Ellen Setcher will be sharing his story from Montana, Jews in Montana. And then in 2 weeks is Rabbi Rick Jacobs. It'll be very interesting to hear what the president of the Union for Reform Judaism has to say to us. It's great seeing everyone. Anita, thank you. Gili and Laila, thank you so much. Great morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gili, nice to finally meet you face to face.
Thank you, Anita. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So much.
Laila.
Have a nice day.
Thank you so much. It was absolutely inspiring. Thank you.